me. Hello, hi. Dimelang, welcome to, if you're watching this, you're watching ADN Lifestyle What's Tonight. You see, I told you I haven't done this in a while. You tuned into ADN Lifestyle What's Tonight. Brought to you by Audionomics Entertainment, and I'm chilling with the one, the only, DpRSOUNDS. Why do you look different from your YouTube videos?
Niso.
Aye.
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 Sraz.
Oh, really? If I get it on the one video I was watching.
Oh, any corner is
Because I'm like, I get kulumuntu abathenga on interview I get you don't look the same. I'm like, why am mhlophe namhlanje?
Ngimhlophe. Saza.
Ngithi ugeze ngebisi ngoba uzwile ukuthi
Cha.
uzakimi.
Cha.
And I mean ngitlo in the dark. How are you doing?
No, saphila. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for not asking, but yeah, namngiyaphila.
Wena unjani?
Zulu man. Ngiyaphila baba.
Siyabona.
I usually like to deep dive into a bit of background so we can know who you are. Mara wena ngiyakuza nje ukuthi ubuye emlazi.
Cha, ngoba juice. Unfortunately.
Born and bred.
Anginawo amakhaya, unfortunately.
Manje wakhuluma isiZulu esinje?
Hayi phela truth imfundiso yasekhaya.
Siyabonga abazali. Siyabonga. Because a lot of people, no. Okay, let's hear a little bit about you, your background, Kulelepi, what your real name is, and why. Okay.
How far back do I go?
As far as you want. I've got all day. Okay, maybe not.
Is it strictly music or anything goes?
Anything goes. I want to hear what were your... Okay, you see, now I've got a lot of questions, but
yeah, I'd
rather you tell me than me having to ask you questions. I don't want this to feel like an interview. I want this to have a conversation.
Answer your interview. Tell us about yourself. So, real name Ubandile. Sibongo Wakantlap.
Okay.
Angna second name or anything like that.
Boring, but yeah.
Go right. Kawanga sengu Alfios or something like that.
Zakaria.
Last born in a family of 3. Well, the full family is 5, my mom and dad, but then I have 2 older brothers.
Okay.
Firstborn is 10 years older than me, secondborn is 6 years older than me. Born and bred is View. So I've lived as View all my life.
Makes sense. Your friend looks like a View guy.
Manje what's the talk about?
But really? You guys just swap words. When I have fun in Togoza. No offense. Whatever that means.
So I went to primary school, Dinwiddie Primary.
Okay.
Like Dinwiddie High School, it was Dominican Convent. Josie, I said JP. Fun fact, it doesn't exist anymore.
Baby fly by night.
Be right up until I think last year. Last year for some other reasons. Then I went to study Stellenbosch accounting. So I'm a soon to be chartered accountant actually. We did that. Then I went to Stellenbosch, got my degree, got my honors, came back in 2020. Worked at a company, COVID hit, but now I'm going to Akshata. Last year, we since remember so.
Nice.
And then in a month's time, we're doing the white wedding.
Okay, I'm invited. That's why.
So my wife out there.
Shout out to the wifey.
And then so musically, grew up in a house where mostly the influences were mostly jazz. For my dad, unama LP, unama record. But my 2 older brothers at the time, let's got some compilations. So Fresh, Nabo Vini, Nabo Christos. So that's the music I grew up listening up to. So I could say value music I was in Bam. So nice. Credit to them. But then growing up, I think we were in high school mostly. I was that guy guys who had like the latest songs.
Of course.
E250 and whatnot. So I was that guy. You know when you masisabam before so. Yes. So that was me. I think it grew from there. When I went to varsity. So mina bengumuntu ofunda with music on. I'm not those
silent.
yeah,
whatnot.
silent,
Yeah.
white noise.
White noise. No.
I'm not that type. So with music, so obviously YouTube.
Yeah.
At that time, I would play Coffee, I would Dakapo, Kulo the song, I would Mix Mag, Valentine's those years. And then I was like, man, this thing can't be that hard. Yeah, well, I was born. Yeah, I was born. And then obviously download virtual DJ. I was fully sang virtual. Then I started doing my own mixes. Then I was like, okay, it is Kubek born. My fully channel. So I think it was 2021. I opened my YouTube channel. Just mixing gear. Because I had footy, I was that guy who kept music. So being my hard drive, teras and terabytes of music.
Yeah.
I was circular on my hard drive. Yeah,
story for another day.
Yeah. So that was that. Yeah, so Slibes push a Leo YouTube channel, okay? Thanks for everyone's support. Thanks to family and friends.
Please subscribe.
Please subscribe. Sfige corner. But yeah, so that's where the love is, and I'm that guy in music. I was telling off camera uti random day, keep on my controller, let me listen to music and I record it.
Hence the videos that we've seen on YouTube.
Yeah, says my video as if it's live. That's a concept about my last day. I was sitting at a table with one of my friends, like, "Hi man, will keep my mix, it's just still photos as we can't see the face, who's this guy?" And then I was like, it can't be that hard, because I always thought eating equipment daddy. So that was my blocking all along with eating equipment.
One thing people don't know is that if you don't start with what you have, you'll never start. Look at our first episode.
You phone me. Sensing now controller. Like I said, I bought headphones for these things, so it's just born. So that's how they started. So
nice.
That's how.
That's a nice. It looks like a very nice vibe, gay.
Yeah, Lana. This is Mahalis. December time. Skip above madam.
Very short. So what would you say is your favorite genre?
Definitely deep house. Definitely deep. Yeah, like deep. Then yela na soulfully. Then lezes inyeke sisihlala ngo my mnandi ngo. I think not to bracket myself mostly, but my mnandi I can listen to, but mostly it's deep house.
A lot of people will say soulful house is not the same anymore. What do you think about that?
Ukuthi siyazama nala eMzansi ngoba mina my influence of soulful izinto zangahle abo in Kenny Carpenter nabo Sbanban abo DJ Span, so I don't listen to them as much ngoba I think eMzansi seyifikile ngesound yayo. Not that it ever left, but the people the DJs and producers we're listening to these days are doing their thing. So angsa nabo edges ngisabanika break abo James there, but it's purely local mostly for my sets currently.
Would you ever consider going into production?
The production angazi mhlambe it's me but fortunately I have friends around me who are into it. So maba recorder ngiba khona, and I get the vele mangise studio with them. Yes, I have that thing, but ngibona ngathi man there's a disconnect.
And it's okay.
For me there's a disconnect. So maybe one day, yes. But not. It's either you do the other. So it's either you're a producer then you become a DJ, but there's other people who are producers who then become DJ. So mhlambe sizabona ukuthi where it ends up.
All right. And the inspiration behind today's set?
Namhlanje it's mostly new stuff. Because on a weekly basis I check out what's out and then I download. During the week on my commutes to work, I listen to if I like it, it's okay, but it's mostly deep. I think it's 100% local, like I said. These days, I'm actually so let's appreciate that. You never get to a place where ungadlala said and then umuntu uyodlala after uyodlala similar or the same songs. It's nengi. But locally. Deep as I define it for me, stuff I listen. So I also, only play stuff I listen to. So if you know that I'm playing such a thing, I listen to it. So angenzelanga muti favor.
It's not me. It's not just me. I do the same.
Angenzelanga muti favor. I didn't get shout-outs from someone. Is mamela now.
Nice. I'd like you to give people your socials and where they can book you if they want to book you.
So socials on YouTube, it's DpRSOUND Music, spelled DpRSOUNDS. Sound.
Uncle MK. Sounds or sound.
Sounds underscore music. On Instagram is DpRSOUNDS underscore. In TikTok ngisayiqala, so it's fine. And then for bookings, the email address is DpRSOUNDS@gmail.com. Inamba asmin kancane.
Hayi ungabani bazokusendela
Yeah, inamba sizatholana in those socials. Then sikhuluma.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming through today.
Thank you for having
Can't
me.
wait.
Yebo.
Cannot wait. Please also subscribe
Yes.
to Audionomics. Like, I can tell you this thing every day. Like,
Yes, and the views are going, Mara.
I'm a subscribers.
Like,
Like,
understand.
and it's mahala. Like, it costs you zilch to just click subscribe. And if and my notifications, you can literally just go and say no notifications.
How?
Guys, come on. And also, please buy my merch. Blanca merch. DM me. Get out, Sarah. Sharpney. All right. This is ADN Lifestyle with Sanati, brought to you by Audionomics Entertainment, and we are out.
Thank you.
Is the language too strong? Kungani, kungani? Is it the color of my skin? Do I have too much strength? Is the language too strong? Kungani, kungani? Is it the color of my skin? Do I have too much strength? Is the language too strong? Kungani, kungani?
solve it. Until something's proven empirically, epistemological concepts, whatever your conceptual ideas, they have to make a juxtaposition with reality someplace, so that you know by empirical evidence that what you have said was reality is tested to be reality, proven reality. Now, if that was above some of your heads, I was throwing that out for a few out here that think that they are too intellectual for us. There are always a few who come in and think that they have a great deal of wisdom, that they can somehow give we poor, struggling people here, polarized as we are in the lower end of the socioeconomic income picture, and they think that they can reach down to our grab existence and lift us up.
Yes, sir.